Onkwarihwa'shon, welcome to Onkwarihwa'shon television, a program about laws in Kahnawake and how the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake is now bringing laws to the people and the people bringing laws to Kahnawake. We've had a couple of episodes so far talking about the various angles about what this is, the community decision-making process. Still new, despite the fact that it's been going on for a couple of years now, but the ball is starting to roll. Joining us on the program, actually returning to the program, is Chief Mike Bush, who is the Justice Portfolio Chief, and that is a very big job here in Kahnawake. Also joining us for the first time on the program is Chief Onkwarihwa'shon, who is on the Chiefs Oversight Committee, and we'll explain a little bit about that as well, what that is and why we have a Chiefs Oversight Committee in the community decision-making process. But first of all, welcome, folks. Thank you. Yeah, good to have you back, Mike, and glad to have you here, Gus. Yeah. Well, let's talk to you first, Gus, as you join us here for the first time. You got on board as a council chief just as all of this was starting to roll out, and the first hearings were actually like almost within a month of you coming onto
I believe
onto
September.
council.
Yeah, September 2009 was the first justice hearing, and prior to that, when they were doing the portfolio assignments, I wanted to be on what was this big thing. The community decision-making process sounded very exciting. And then once we had the first hearing in September, you know, it's just been moving forward, and I know that there's a lot of work to be done. It's a new process. I know people are still confused, and a lot of information needs to be put out to the community so there's a better understanding of just what this is. So I'm really excited about, you know, the future of lawmaking in the community and what this could become as the community starts to understand it and has more buy-in.
Well, of course, Chief Bush has been on council for a while and has been part of the whole movement, working with the traditional government working group and all of that. That kind of, I guess, helped steer this this new direction. And so he has probably a different perspective than you. You come on board and it's just rolling. What kind of perspective do you have on that? When you came in and here is this process, was it what you were expecting when you got elected?
No, because I don't think there's been anything like this before. You know, you always heard that council makes decisions, council makes laws without community involvement. So now here's this new process that gives the people the opportunity to come participate, voice their concerns, what they think about certain legislation, and, you know, they're able to be a part of it. And I think it was a long time coming, and like I said, I hope that in the future, as people start to understand it more, that they're going to become more involved and understand that this is a process that was created for them. You know, for once, that they're going to have some say, some participation in lawmaking, and maybe in the future it'll be for other decisions that affect the community, not just laws. So.
Well, we'll see how that goes. Chief Bush, glad to have you here again. The process itself, we've talked about it in general. One thing we haven't really talked about is how community members just have not only the right to participate, or almost the obligation to participate, I guess, but the right or obligation to actually create or ask for laws. What do people do when they say, and I'll just throw, for example, one of the laws that was brought forth recently was, well, let's start with the tobacco law, because that was one that was a community member who came forth. Because others, you know, there's all kind of ways people can make laws, whether it's a council chief who's considered a community member at that point, also the various units of the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake, but also community members. We've said this over and over again. Anybody can say, I think we need a law on something. And one, for example, was the anti-tobacco proposed legislation that came up from Mr. White, a young gentleman who feels that maybe tobacco should be barred, or basically along those lines. That one hasn't come up yet, but the fact is, he came forth as a private citizen and said, I feel we need a law. And a lot of people, I guess, that's hard for them to adjust to, exactly, because for so many years it was, all right, we elected you guys, go ahead, do your stuff. And now we're saying that You think we need a law? Go ahead and bring it forth. So how exactly does the process work in that instance? Is it really as simple as it sounds?
You didn't leave very much to say. That's pretty much all there is. But think about it. I mean, for how many years prior to the Indian Act, we were making laws for the community. It was done by Council of Chiefs, presumably, or clan mothers. This is the law in Onkwarihwa'shon. And it was okay up until the time that the Indian Act steps into the picture. And then all of a sudden, we're no longer in control of what, quote unquote, the law is in Onkwarihwa'shon. It becomes a responsibility or the obligation of a minister in Ottawa. And for the longest time, it was recognized that if we were going to do something, we had to look into the Indian Act to determine how and if it can be done. And the Indian Act has a very small window of opportunity in terms of what an elected council can put into place. Pigs at large. Okay, everybody jokes about it, but the truth of the matter is that's the kind of thing that we will put in or made responsible for as elected chiefs. Well, it's come time, and as a result of my involvement in the traditional government working group, we wanted to go back to the people. And it's gone from there. I mean, we've had our ups and downs trying to work with longhouses in traditional government, and I'm not going to go through that. That's ancient history. It's not out of the question yet, but it hasn't worked as well as it could have. So now we're confronted with, well, how do we bring the question of law and lawmaking back into the community at large? That means everybody. Not the Mohawk Council of Onkwarihwa'shon, not the Indian Act minister, and not any specific special interest group that's out there, okay? Because we don't have buy-in. And if we don't have buy-in, we don't have effective lawmaking, okay? And just as an example, and there's questions about whether it is or it isn't, and I have my own feelings about that, but take the ATV law. It was more or less passed by council. It was suggested by the peacekeepers, in fact, okay? And then a law was drafted up and it was put into place, and everybody is relatively happy with it. But the significant part of it is that almost everybody abides by it. That's the true test of a law, is if the community buys in and abides by it, it is the law. It's accepted within the community, and it becomes a working, viable institution within the community. And basically that's what happened. We do have people who will break the law, but that's to be expected. No matter what law you have, you're going to have somebody who breaks it. And well, that leads us into the other thing, which is the court or justice system, and that's what we're working on, to be able to deal with what happens when somebody breaks it. Do we take them to Longueuil? Do we call up the minister and say, oh my goodness, oh my goodness? Or do we deal with it the way we used to deal with it traditionally? And I don't mean traditionally in the quote-unquote longhouse sense. I mean traditionally as a people, how did we deal with people who were doing harm within the community, whatever that harm is?
Just to go back to the ATV law, that was one that was a long time coming because the peacekeepers suggested it, but a lot of community members kept saying, we have to do something about it. So I guess that's where the buy-in comes in, because so many community members were pushing for that. And I guess that's kind of the theory behind community decision-making process, is to get the people together to say, this is really what we want. And the beauty of it is that when the decision comes to be made, the discussions, you see how discussions tend to flow and move toward a certain resolution. They're not black and white, and the meeting, sometimes the simplest decision you think will take 5 minutes, and that's the one that takes the longest. You can't tell how things are going to go.
There's nothing simple, but there was a key word that you used, and the word is we. You said, we, what do we want? And that's the significance about how this could work and should work. It's we that do it. We make the determination as to what needs to be done. And it's a long process. The Justice Act development has proven that. And there's people looking today trying to figure out how to make it a little bit more effective.
We will talk a little later on in the program about that, because despite all the good intentions, it does take long. And when you look at all of the laws that are in the hopper and all the ones that are kind of waiting for action, and then, you know, it will take a long time, and whether or not we have the resources to do it at this time is always questionable when you have so much work to do and so few people. So it is complicated. But getting back to the specifics, all right, Mr. White says, I think we need a law. It wasn't very complicated for him to do so, right?
No, he just wrote a letter to the Legislative Coordinating Commission, basically outlining why he thought that there should be an anti-tobacco law in the community. And I believe one of his explanations is that, you know, traditionally tobacco was used, you know, as our relationship to the Creator and for medicinal purposes, but now it's turned into this perversion, as he called it, that, you know, it's on every corner, there's cigarette stores everywhere. Was this what tobacco was put on the earth for? And something to that effect anyway. So as he was saying, anybody in the community could put anything forward that they think there's a lacking or a need, exactly, for a law in the community. So the next step now is that some technicians have been assigned to the file to gather information for, I guess, the support of tobacco and the support of having an anti-tobacco law. And that's what's going to be proposed when it's time to have a hearing.
I guess what really needs to be clarified to the community is that when somebody proposes a law, it goes to the, you know, to the Legislative Coordinating Commission. At that point, we're not cheerleaders for it. And I think there's been some confusion over, like, if somebody's putting a law in, it means automatically we're pushing for the law. What it is pushing for the process. It's to make sure that the process is followed so that discussions happen, for example, for this law. That's what happened in Justice.
No, information. You go out to the community and say, this is what we've got, and this is potentially what could happen, and there is a need to be addressed. And that's what happened, okay? So we've had all of these community hearings, all of the information that was collected, put into a report. A report was given over to a working group, and it's basically the people in the JC today, Justice Commission today, along with the technical team. The technical team is comprised of individuals from MCK, not too many technical people, the Court of Ganawage, Legal Services, and 3 community members who are selected, at the community hearings. And those people sit down to make sure that everything that happened in the community hearings is actually delivered over into whatever becomes the draft law, which then has to go back to the community for approval and acceptance.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we mentioned off the top of the show that Chief Sky Deer is part of the Chief's Oversight Committee. Chief and Council do have a role here, and one of them is a certain number of chiefs are sitting in the Legislative Coordinating Commission as participants. Maybe you can explain that part and why does this exist? Okay,
well, there's 2 separate functions of chiefs. One of them on the LCC, again, it needs to be clarified that LCC deals strictly with the process, and then whoever the originator of a certain law is responsible for the content. So like you were saying, with the Justice technical team, they're responsible for the content of the law. They're basically the experts. You're talking about people that work within the justice field that know exactly what should go into drafting a law. Now, the chief's oversight for the LCC is to ensure that the process is being followed, that due diligence is done. Okay, so that's for the LCC, and then on the technical team to make sure that the mandate that was given by the community members, that's adhered to.
Yeah, okay.
Same function as the community reps, you know, except, you have community reps that are independent from council, and then, you know, as our responsibility to the community to make sure that, you know, everything that was said in the hearings, that's what we're working toward.
Well, the oversight committee, chiefs anyway, are also there to make sure that the mechanics are available to make the thing run. Mm. Because, you know, you can say that you want a new court system, but if you don't have the money to build a court, where are you going to go? So you have to go to council, then it becomes council's responsibility. So there's a two-way stream that's working here in order to make the thing work, but then to put together what you want is where this working group or technical team is involved, is putting the pieces together, but then to make it run, you have to have council on side.
Yeah, and it's not as I guess as simple as it used to be, you know, 200 or 300 years ago, when, you know, once the corn was planted and once the deer was slaughtered, you had time to sit and you sat around a fire. Today's a little bit different. People's schedules are a lot different, and now when there's meetings, you have to rent the hall and get a PA system and make sure you have enough facilitators and all of this. So it becomes somewhat complicated, and sometimes I don't think the community has an appreciation for how much work that has to go into this in order for it to work properly. So that's part of the reason why we're doing this show, to let people know that there's work that has to be done, and that it's not, you know, there's not scheming that's going on. It's really just trying to make sure that the mandates are done. And like you're saying, with the chief's oversight and the community members who are taking part in the technical team, there's safety mechanisms involved, which is very, very important.
Checks and balances, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some of the problems we had. We talked a little bit last time about the Type 2 and some of the confusion that happens. Type 1 laws are the big laws. Type 2 are more of regulations. It was kind of, I guess, odd for me when we looked at the justice hearings and how I think they went pretty smoothly, because everybody had a focus, and even though the opinions were all over the place, they kind of came to some sort of clarity over the course of several months and several hearings. And you know, I remember on the day it was finally the mandate was given, even though the crowds kind of thinned by then. But when it was over, there was a really nice feeling of accomplishment. On the other hand, something that seems so simple is a Type 2, which is just, well, we need some regulations. The law exists, but we need regulations so that we can enforce the law properly. That's the one that's given us problems. There's only been one so far, and that's understood. But what can we do to ensure that community members are comfortable? What are some of the things we can do better, do you think, to have community members more comfortable about this? Because we saw in the hearing that some were not happy at all. They didn't like the way this was going. They thought it was wrong somehow, and council should have no say on this, and maybe every law should be, or every decision should be made by the people.
Well, that might potentially be what happens down the road someplace if this thing is made to work. But not every decision. And the community has said it time and time again is, you know, you guys are put into place to make decisions. Okay, it's one thing to make decisions on a specific issue, problem, or whatever might be out there. Okay, you want to decide how much money to spend or don't spend money. That's a decision. But when it comes to lawmaking, and it's going to impact everybody, Type 1, or if it's going to impact a specific group or body, Type 2, all right, they should be participating in what it's supposed to do, okay? And the people should be saying, yes, we want it, or no, we don't. Or if what's presented, and in the case of justice, nothing was really presented, okay? Council didn't go out and write a little scheme and put it out there and say, pass this, or this is what we... No, it was actually being developed at those community sessions, all right? And it's significant because it will impact the entire community, all right? And everybody should have taken advantage of the opportunity. But when you're talking about Type 2, I think that in that case, it was a law that was already out there. And people had difficulty with the law once they read it. And the problem was is that once, you know, for some people, it may have been the first time they even knew there was a sanitary conditions law from like 1960, what was the year?
Mid-60s, somewhere,
Yeah,
67.
69, whenever it was, as old as it is, this thing has been out there. And nobody ever looked at it, much less knew about it. So when they finally opened it up and they said, oh my God, you know, what are we going to do? And you can't have this in here. Well, that caused confusion because they thought that's what was being proposed as a law.
They didn't look at just the amendments. They
And,
looked at the entire law.
And which is good, okay? And we have to do that. In fact, built into the LCC is every 5 years they have to go over a specific existing law to do exactly that, determine what works and what doesn't. Some people are familiar with blue laws. An example, and it's a little bit outrageous, is in New York City. You cannot call a bar a saloon. This is the existing law to this day, okay? S-A-L-O-O-N. You cannot call a bar, a tavern, a brasserie. You cannot call it a saloon, okay? So one guy who had on his bar, saloon, he got beat up by New York City. So what he did is he changed it to balloon. I mean, this is what you have to do with certain kinds of laws that exist on the books and have not been changed. So that being, I'm going to get picked up. I'm picked on for this one. But in any case,
I'm going to the balloon after this because this is too much.
If you ever go to Lincoln Center in New York City, directly across the street on the corner, you'll find this bar. And it's called Pete's Balloon or some such thing. It's still there. This is a true story. And the point being is that there's things that exist in certain laws that were done for a time, for a particular reason, and that reason may not be good today. So you got to go through these laws every once in a while. And that's sort of what happened to sanitary conditions law. People said, look, this shouldn't be this way. Okay, fine, then let's fix it. And that's part of the process. It was identified as a problem that needed to be fixed. In addition to the little amendments that were being suggested, which was the purpose for type 2. So.
I know the question arose out of that then is, should we actually review the laws prior to them going to the community? Because there were some things in the sanitary conditions law, like you have to inform council if your animal dies or something, like you said, might have been applicable in 1965, but today no one's going to come and say, hey, by the way, chief and council, here's a letter submitting saying that my dog died and how do I handle the carcass and so forth. I mean,
or my goldfish.
Yeah, something like that. And so maybe what needs to happen, you're talking about the mandatory review of laws. Should that happen prior to amendments, you know, before the law goes to the community? Because like you said, people looked at the entire law, not just the amendments, and some of the stuff that was in there from, I think it was amended a couple of times actually.
Yeah.
And they're not applicable today, some of the sections. So should council remove them before putting it to the community, or should the community look at it and say, you know what, this doesn't apply, take this out, get this out, and let's focus on what are we trying to get at? What was the need for the sanitary conditions law?
Yeah, so everything being new, you know, you have to remember that there will be some stumbles, and I guess there were some slight stumbles on this one, but the fact is that the amendments were created not for control purposes, but really for protection of the earth, because it was all about environmental concerns. And but people really focused on the process. And like I said, we have to make sure that people are clear with the process. So, you know, once again, we've been saying this over and over again, but anybody in Kahnawake has a right to say, I feel there should be a law on this. I mean, we've all had discussions with community members who say they're not happy with something. I know some chiefs are suggesting, well, if you think there should be a law or a changing of the law, then bring it up. People don't. And that's a problem. you know, and we need people to feel that they should be comfortable enough to just say, yeah, I think so. So let me be the next person to say, to write that little letter. And Mr. White's letter was what, 2 paragraphs? 3? It was not pages and pages, so people shouldn't be afraid that, oh, I'm going to get stuck in the bureaucracy.
It could be as simple as saying this law should be repealed. And that's all you have to say. And if it goes into the community hearing, and the people who are in the hearing say, hey, you want to know something that makes sense? Maybe we should repeal this thing. Okay, is it going to be that simple? It might be, I don't know. Depends on what it is. And then it would finish going through the CDMP process, and it could eventually be repealed in time, hopefully sooner than later. That was the magic of it. Because when we received that letter on this law, the tobacco, my first reaction was, the process works. That's all it took, was this one little letter. And then put it out into the community, get the community to feedback on it, and that will determine whether it stays, goes, or if it becomes something else. Okay, that's the beauty of it.
The other part of this is that by law, it has to be responded to. If somebody says, I feel there should be a law, or an amendment, or a repeal, it has to be responded to. You can't just say, well, nah, I don't think so. Because, I mean, in many eyes, the tobacco one, for example, a lot of people said, come on, it's everywhere. The town runs on this. How are we supposed to? So in some eyes, it would have been just put in the back pocket and pretend it didn't happen. But that's not how it works. You have to respond to it. So.
And give the community the opportunity to say whether they think that it is necessary to have this kind of law, or they could say no. You know, and that's, like you said, the beauty of it, going to hearings and letting the community have the say in how we move forward with this proposed piece of legislation.
All right, so we have a couple of minutes left. I just want to go back to Mike because, again, the whole basis of laws in Kahnawake are going to be dependent on whether we have our own justice system. That's been the biggest problem for years, is taking it to the Court of Kahnawake and then finding out that we can't do anything about it because
it doesn't exist within the Indian Act.
That's correct. And that's been such a huge problem. So it always goes back to justice. That's why justice was first on the docket. That's why it was the first set of hearings. And as we've said, there's been progress. We've been moving along. Just maybe since we do this about once a month, Mike, where are we at now?
Okay, we're getting close to being done. We had, the easy part was doing essentially what courts do today in any jurisdiction, New York, Toronto, wherever. Putting that together it's pretty simple because it's pretty similar to all these other jurisdictions and how they operate. Rules, regulations, procedures, what have you. The hard part was coming up with restorative justice. And that's what we're working on as we speak. That's what we're working on. And it's coming pretty close to fruition. And what's encouraging about that is it's going to become a fundamental and integral part of the Court of Kahnawake, the justice system of Kahnawake. Not necessarily the court. I'm going to get beat up on that one too. But the point is that we're trying to instill this notion into the resolution of conflict within Kahnawake. That's what makes it challenging and exciting.
Well, lots more to come, and we invite you to join us whenever you can to watch this program. And anytime you have any questions on the process, talk to one of the chiefs, 632-7500, or you pass by, you meet them at the bank, the post office, whatever. And, they'll be happy to share the information. All right, thank you both, Chief Onkwarihwa'shon on the Chiefs Oversight Committee and Chief Mike Bush from the Justice Commission, Justice Portfolio Chief. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today, and we'll see you next time. Onkwarihwa'shon.
Ona.
Ona.
Kanya ke haga thadi adaraste kayerniga hiadu zewaderoru.